Hello and welcome to another episode where we attempt to fall asleep, but we succeed because we have the help of Habibi Spice, aka me. Before Larry calms down and you calm down, I would like you to take a look at the merchandise to support this channel. There is going to be links. You will know where to click because you are smart. Yes. Also, if you hate being dressed, then you can support this channel by not bumping into the microphone, but by becoming a member of the channel. It is $5 a month. $5. So the reason Larry is acting crazy is because there are treats in this drawer right here. Little does he know that the biggest treat you can get is good sleep. Once he figures that out, he will fall asleep on the desk. And you will as well. Not on the desk, hopefully in your own bed. Now today, we are going to be talking, rather reading Stephen King. Stephen King is known for his darker themes. And listening to something so dark will make you appreciate what you have. Enough treat for today. So the reason I want to read Stephen King is because I notice I got comment, or maybe two comment, saying you should read Stephen King. And I have only one book with me at home that is Stephen King. It is actually multiple part book of The Green Mile. If you are not familiar with this story, then strap in, because we will get through at least a part of it until you hopefully fall asleep, and until my premonition come true of Larry coming back, which should be a few seconds now. You're staring at the desk, just jump. There we go. The back of the book says this: they were sisters, and the picture-perfect image of innocence. No one understood their brutal deaths, not even the man who killed them. But John Coffey is about to gain a new insight about his life in prison and about the one man who will walk him down that green mile toward destiny. Maybe he is about to make money, who knows? Forward a letter? No, I'm not reading forward. The Green Mile, Part 1. The Two Dead Girls. Amazing story to fall asleep to. This happened in 1932, when the state penitentiary was still at Cold Mountain, and the electric chair was there too, of course. The inmates made joke about the chair, the way people always make joke about things that frighten them but can't be gotten away from. Just like you say, I sleep 2 hours last night. Ha 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 ha. What's funny? You think sleep deprivation is funny? Then I have a joke for you. They called it Old Sparky, or the Big Juicy. They made crack about the power bill and how Warden Moores would always cook his Thanksgiving dinner that fall. They made crack about the power bill and how Warden Moores would cook his Thanksgiving dinner that fall with his wife, Melinda, too sick to cook. But for ones who actually had to sit down in that chair, the humor went out of the situation in a hurry. Makes sense. I presided over 78 executions during my time at Cold Mountain. That's one figure I've never been confused about. I'll remember it on my deathbed. And I think that for most of those men, the truth of what was happening to them finally hit all the way home when their ankles were being clamped to the stout oak of old Sparky's legs. The realization came then. You would see it rising in their eyes, a kind of cold dismay that their own legs had finished their careers. The blood still ran in them. The muscles were still strong, but they were finished. All the same, they were never going to walk another country mile or dance with a girl at a barn raising. What the hell is a barn raising? Old Sparky's clients came to a knowledge of their deaths from their ankles up. There was a black silk bag that went over their heads after they had finished their rambling and mostly disjointed last remarks. It was supposed to be for them, but I always thought it was really for us, to keep us from seeing the awful tide of dismay in their eyes as they realized they were going to die with their knees bent. That could have two different meanings. I know a lot of you have your knees bent very often. Anyway, there was no death row at Cold Mountain. Only E Block, sat apart from the other four and about a quarter their size. Brick instead of wood, with a horrible bare metal roof that glared in the summer sun like a delirious eyeball. Stephen King has been talking about eyes a lot, and we have not even been through a full page. 6 cells inside, 3 on each side of a wide center aisle, each almost twice as big as the cells in the other 4 blocks. Singles too, so like 5-star hotel, presidential suite, great accommodations for a prison, especially in the 30s, but the inmates would have traded for cells in any of the other 4. Believe me, they would have traded. If you know you are going to be met with the end of your life, it does not matter how big the cell you sit in or the room you sit in, or how big your bank account is, because it will not buy, it will not balance what is coming. There was never a time during my years as block superintendent when all 6 cells were occupied at one time. Thank God for small favors. 4 was the most, mixed black and white. Well, yes, they did not have color television back then. At Cold Mountain, there was no segregation among the walking dead. And that was a little piece of hell. You want segregation even within the walking dead? Haram. Larry, I know you pretend to be all sweet for treat. I'm not falling for it. One was a woman, Beverly McCall. I gave him treats. Anyway, Beverly McCall, she was black as the ace of spades, beautiful as the sin you never had nerve enough to commit. She put up with 6 years of her husband beating her, but wouldn't put up with his creeping around for a single day. On the evening she found out he was cheating, she stood waiting for the unfortunate Lester McCall, known to his pals and presumably to his extremely short-term mistress as Cutter. Larry is back now. He's known as Cutter at the top of the stairs leading to the apartment over his barber shop. She waited until he got his overcoat half off, then dropped his cheating guts onto his 2-tone shoes. Used one of Cutter's own razors to do it. Ya haram. 2 nights before she was due to sit in Old Sparky, She called me to her cell and said she had been visited by her African spirit father in a dream. He told her to discard her slave name and to die under her free name, Matuomi. That was her request, that her death warrant should be read under the name of Beverly Matuomi. I guess her spirit father didn't give her any first name, or one she could make out anyhow. I said yes, okay, fine. Khalas, you want to die with it doesn't matter, you're gonna die anyway. One thing those years serving as the bull goose screw taught me that was never to refuse the condemned unless I absolutely had to. In the case of Beverly Matuomi, it made no difference anyway. Exactly. The governor called the next day around 3 in the afternoon, commuting her sentence to life in the Grassy Valley Penal Facility for Women. All penal and no penis. I was about to make that joke and then he wrote it, أخو الشرموطة. We used to say back then. I was glad to see Bev's round ass going left instead of right when she got to the duty desk, let me tell you. Habibi, this went sexual very quick. 35 years or so later, had to be at least 35, I saw that name on the obituary page of the paper, under a picture of a skinny-faced black lady with a cloud of white hair and glasses with rhinestones at the corners. It was Beverly. She'd spent the last 10 years of her life a free woman, the obituary said, and had rescued the small-town library of Rains Falls pretty much single-handedly. Larry is laying very sensually and trying to reach for where he thinks the treat is. Khalas, you are so see-through, like Stephen King's writing. She had also taught Sunday school and had been much loved in that little backwater. Librarian dies of heart failure, the headline said, and below that, in smaller type, almost as an afterthought, served over 2 decades in prison for murder. Only the eyes, wide and blazing behind the glasses with the rhinestones at the corners, were the same. They were the eyes of a woman who even at 70 whatever would not hesitate to pluck a safety razor from its blue jar of disinfectant, if the urge seemed pressing. You know, murderers, even if they finish up as old lady librarians in dozy little towns, at least you do if you've spent as much time minding murderers as I did. There was only one time I ever had a question about nature of my job. That, I reckon, is why I'm writing this. The white corridor up the center of E block was floored with linoleum, the color of tired old slimes, and so what was called the last mile at other prison was called the Green Mile at Cold Mountain. It ran, I guess, 60 long paces from south to north, bottom to top. It ran, I guess, 60 long paces from south to north, bottom to top. At the bottom was the restraint room. At the top end was a T-junction. A left turn meant life, if you called what went on in this unbaked exercise yard life. And many did. Many lived it for years, with no apparent ill effects. Thieves and arsonists and sex criminals, all talking their talk and walking their walk and making their little deals. A right turn, though, that was different. First you went into my office, where the carpet was also green, a thing I kept meaning to change and not getting around to, and crossed in front of my desk, which was flanked by the American flag on the left and the state flag on the right. On the far side, there were two doors. One led into the small WC that high and Block E guards, sometimes even Warden Morse, used. The other opened on a kind of storage shed. This was where you ended up when you walked the Green Mile. It was a small door. I had to duck my head when I went through, and John Coffey actually had to sit and scoot. You came out on a little landing, then went down 3 cement steps to a board floor. It was a miserable room without heat and with a metal roof, just like the one on the block, to which it was an adjunct. It was cold enough in there to see your breast during the winter, and stifling in the summer. At the execution of Elmer Manfred in July or August of 1930, that one was, I believe, we had 9 witnesses pass out, sweltering. On the left side of the storage shed again, there was life. Tools, all locked down in frames, crisscrossed with chains, as if they were carbine rifles instead of spades and pickaxes. Dry goods, sacks of seeds for spring planting in the prison gardens, boxes of toilet paper. Oh yes, nothing say life like boxes of toilet papers. Pellets, cross-loaded with blanks for the prison plate shop. Even bags of lime for marking out the baseball diamond and the football gridiron. What is gridiron? The cons played in what was known as the pasture, and fall afternoons were greatly looked forward to at Cold Mountain. On the right, once again, death. Old Sparky, his own self, sitting up on a plank platform at the southeast corner of the storeroom. Stout oak legs, broad oak arms that had absorbed the terrorized sweat of scores of men in the last few minutes of their lives. And the metal cap, usually hung jauntily on the back of the chair, like some robot kid's beanie in a Buck Rogers comic strip. A cord ran from it and through a gasket-circled hole in the cinder block wall behind the chair. Off to one side was a galvanized tin bucket. If you looked inside it, you would see a circle of sponge, cut just right to fit the metal cap. Before executions, it was soaked in brine to better conduct the charge of direct current electricity that ran through the wire, through the sponge, and into the condemned man's brain. If that isn't romantic, I don't know what is. This was the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. 1932 was the year of John Coffey. The details would be in the papers. Still, there for anyone who cared enough to look them out. Someone with more energy than one very old man, whittling away the end of his life in a Georgia nursing home. That was a hot fall. I remember that. Very hot indeed. October, almost like August. And the warden's wife, Melinda, almost like my wife. I'm just kidding. Almost up in the hospital at Indianola for a spell. It was the fall I had the worst urinary infection of my life. Yeah? Not bad enough to put me in the hospital myself, but almost bad enough for me to wish I was dead every time I took a leak. Don't take a leak. It was the fall of Delacroix, the little half-bald Frenchman with the mouse, the one that came in the summer and did that cute trick with the spool. He talked as if I know Delacroix. Mostly though, it was the fall that John Coffey came to in block, sentenced to death for the rape murder of the Tatarek twins. There were 4 or 5 guards on the block each shift, but a lot of them were floaters. Dean Stanton, Harry Terwillinger, and Brutus Howell. The man called him brutal, but it was a joke. He wouldn't hurt a fly unless he had to, in spite of his size. Are all dead now. And so is Percy Wetmore, who really was brutal, not to mention stupid. Percy had no business on E-Block, where an ugly nature was useless and sometimes dangerous, but he was related to the governor by marriage, and so he stayed. It was Percy Wetmore who ushered Coffey onto the block, with the supposedly traditional cry of dead man walking here. This is so extra, imagine. It was still as hot as the hinges of hell. October or not, Larry does not want to give up on the treats today. How about you give up on it? The door to the exercise yard opened, letting in a flood of brilliant light and the biggest man I've ever seen, except for some of the basketball fellows they have on TV down in the resource room. He wore chains on his arms, and across his water barrel of a chest, he wore leggerons on his ankles and shuffled a chain between them that sounded like cascading coins as it ran along the lime-colored corridor between the cells. Percy Wetmore was on one side of him. Skinny little Harry Terwillinger was on the other, and they looked like children walking along with a captured bear. Even Brutus Howell looked like a kid next to Coffey, and Brutal was over 6 feet tall and broad as well, a football tackle who had gone on to play at LSU until he flunked out and came back home to the ridges. John Coffey was black, like most of the men who came to stay for a while in E-Block before dying in old Sparky's lap, and he stood 6 feet 8 inches tall. That's tall. He wasn't all willowy like the TV basketball fellows, though. He was broad in the shoulders and deep through the chest, laced over with muscle in every direction. Maybe he was on steroids, They'd put him in the biggest denims they could find in stores, and still the cuffs of the pants rode halfway up his bunched and scarred calves. The shirt was open to below his chest, and the sleeves stopped somewhere on his forearms. He was holding his cap in one huge hand, which was just as well perched on his bald mahogany ball of a head. It would have looked like the kind of cap an organ grinder's monkey wears, only blue instead of red. He looked like he could have snapped the chains that held him as easily as you might snap the ribbons on a Christmas present. But when you looked in his face, you knew he wasn't going to do anything like that. It wasn't dull, although that was what Percy thought. What is happening outside? It wasn't long before Percy was calling him the Egypt, but lost. What is Egypt? He kept looking around as if to make out where he was. Maybe even who he was. My first thought was that he looked like a black Samson, only after Delilah had shaved him smooth as her faceless little hand and taken all the fun out of him. Dead man walking, Percy trumpeted, howling on that bear of a man's wrist cuff, as if he really believed he could move him if Coffey decided he didn't want to move anymore. Harry didn't say anything, but he looked embarrassed. Dead man, that'll be enough of that, I said. I was what was going to be Coffey's cell, sitting on his bunk. I'd known he was coming, of course, was there to welcome and take charge of him, but had no idea of the man's pure size until I saw him. Percy gave me a look that said we all knew I was an asshole, except for the big dummy, of course, who only knew how to rape and murder little girls. But he didn't say anything. The three of them stopped outside the cell door, which was standing open on its track. I nodded to Harry, who said, "Are you sure you want to be in there with him, boss?" I didn't often hear Harry tell Willinger sound nervous. He'd been right there by my side during the riots of 6 or 7 years before he had never wavered. Even when the rumors that some of them had guns began to circulate, but he sounded nervous then. "Am I going to have any trouble with you, big boy?" I asked, sitting there on the bunk trying not to look or sound as miserable as I felt. That urinary infection I mentioned earlier wasn't as bad as it eventually got, but it was no day at the beach, let me tell you. Coffey shook his head slowly, once to the left and once to the right, then back to dead center. Once his eyes found me, they never left me. Harry had a clipboard with Coffey's forms on it in one hand. "Give it to him," I said to Harry. "Put it on his hand." Harry did. The big mutt took it like a sleepwalker. "Now bring it to me, big boy," I said, and Coffey did, his chains jingling and rattling. He had to duck his head just to enter the cell. I looked up and down mostly to register his height as a fact and not an optical illusion. It was real, 6 feet 8 inches. His weight was given as 280, but I think that was only an estimate. He was to have been 320, maybe 350 pounds. Under the space for scars and identifying marks, one word had been blocked out in the laborious printing of Magnusson, the old trustee in registration: numerous. I looked up. Coffey had shuffled a bit to one side, and I could see Harry standing across the corridor in front of Delacroix's cell. He was our only other prisoner in E Block when Coffey came in. Del was a slight, balding man with the worried face of an accountant who knows his embezzlement will soon be discovered. His tame mouse was sitting on his shoulder. The fact that Delacroix has a mouse is fascinating to me. In prison. Like, did the mouse come to him in prison and then he make it his pet? Or did he bring it in the prison with him? He's like, "Hey, I know I'm here in prison, death row, but I have this mouse, can he come, Habibi?" Like this detail I need to know. Percy Wetmore was leaning in the doorway of the cell, which has just become John Coffey's. He had taken his hickory baton out of the custom-made holster he carried it in, and was tapping it against one palm the way a man does when he has a toy he wants to use. And all at once I couldn't stand to have him there. Maybe it was the unseasonable heat. Maybe it was the urinary infection heating up my groin and making the itch of my flannel underwear all but unbearable. Maybe it was knowing that the state had sent me a black man next door to an idiot to execute. And Percy clearly wanted to hand-tool him a little first. Probably it was all those things. Whatever it was, I stopped caring about his political connections for a little while. Percy, I said, they're moving house over in the infirmary. Bill Dodge is in charge of that detail. I know he is, I said. Go and help him. That isn't my job, Percy said. This big lagoon is my job. Lagoon was Percy's joke name for the big ones, a combination of lug and goon. He resented the big ones. He wasn't skinny, like Harry Terwilliger, but he was short. A banty rooster sort of guy, the kind that likes to pick fights, especially when the odds are all their way, and vain about his hair. Could hardly keep his hands off it. Then your job is done, I said. Get over to the infirmary. His lower lip pushed out. Bill Dodge and his men were moving boxes and stacks of sheets, even the beds. The whole infirmary was going to a new frame, building over on the west side of the prison. Hot work, heavy lifting. Percy Wetmore wanted no part of it either. They got all the men they need, he said. Then get over there and straw boss, I said, raising my voice. I saw Harry wince and paid no attention. If the governor ordered Warden Morse to fire me for ruffling the wrong set of feathers, who was Hal Morse going to put in my place? Percy? It was a joke. I really don't care what you do, Percy, as long as you get out of here for a while. For a moment, I thought he was going to stick, and there'd be real trouble, with Coffey standing there the whole time, like the world's biggest stopped clock. Then Percy rammed his belly back onto his hand-tooled holster. Foolish, damned, vainglorious thing, and went stalking up the corridor. I don't remember which guard was sitting at the duty desk that day. One of the floaters, I guess. But Percy must not have liked the way he looked, because he growled, "You wipe that smirk off your shit-poke face, or I'll wipe it off for you," as he went by. There was a rattle of keys, a momentary blast of hot sunlight from the exercise yard, and then Percy Wetmore was gone, at least for the time being. Delacroix's mouse ran back and forth from one of the little Frenchman's shoulder to the other, his filament whiskers twitching. "Be still, Mr. Jingles," Delacroix said, and the mouse stopped on his left shoulder, just as if he had understood. "Just be so still and so quiet," in Delacroix's lifting Cajun accent. Quiet came out sounding exotic and foreign. Quiet, quiet. So I guess Delacroix does not have a French accent. Just be so still and quiet. It's so quiet. he, he spelled it Kwahd. You go lie down, Del, I said curtly. Take you a rest. This is none of your business either. He did as I said. He had raped a young girl and killed her, and had then dropped her body behind the apartment house where she lived. Wow. Doused it with coal oil, and then set it on fire, hoping in some muddled way to dispose of the evidence of his crime. The fire had spread to the building itself, had engulfed it, and 6 more people had died, 2 of them children. It was the only crime he had in him, and now he was just a mild-mannered man with a worried face, a bald pate, and long hair straggling over the back of his shirt collar. He would sit down with old Sparky in a little while, and old Sparky would make an end to him. But whatever it was that had done that awful thing was already gone. And now he lay on his bunk, letting his little companion run squeaking over his hands in a way that was the worst. Old Sparky never burned what was inside them, and the drugs they inject them with today don't put it to sleep. It vacates, jumps to someone else, and leaves us to kill husks that aren't really alive anyway. I'm going to stop here because I feel like this is a good beat to stop on. There is no more crime left in this guy. The bad stuff he wanted to do, he did. And now he is just a little piece of Delacroix meat that is going to meet his fate, whether he like it or not. Don't do the crime if you don't want to do the time. But there is no time. It's the opposite. Don't do the crime if you don't want to lose your time, I guess. I will leave you with that thought. If you are thinking of doing crimes, don't. Or maybe dream of you doing them to get them out of your system. Maybe get a pet mouse before you do a crime, not after. Which is still a detail we don't know, by the way. Stephen King, you have to tell me. Did the mouse come before or after the crime? Anyway, I hope you enjoy this. I hope this helps you relax, because what's more relaxing than talking about death row? I hope you can get to sleep tonight, very deep sleep, and if not, you know where to come back. Good night and sleep well.